This time on Crime Inc. An Ann John accused of sex crimes. Gloucester's House of Horrors. Fighting crime in post-war London. A mysterious martial arts cult. A bizarre murder plot. And priceless paintings stolen in Rome. But first, the Massachusetts trial of the century. 10 years after her conviction for the involuntary manslaughter of a baby entrusted to her care, former nanny Louise Woodward was named the most notorious criminal to be convicted in the U.S. state of Massachusetts.
Members of the jury, Commonwealth versus Louise Woodward. Is the defendant guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Guilty of what?
Guilty of murder in the second degree.
The case polarized public opinion, with many people believing the British-born teenager was the victim of circumstances, while others, including the baby's parents, were firmly convinced of her guilt. 8-month-old Matthew Eapen became unconscious while in 18-year-old Woodward's care on February 4, 1997. He died 5 days later, and the nanny was charged with murder. He vehemently denied any wrongdoing, but despite the circumstantial nature of the case, a jury found her guilty. The verdict was a complete shock to the defense team, which had gambled that the lack of forensic evidence and Woodward's consistent testimony would bring about an acquittal. Jurors heard from many witnesses, including Matthew's parents, Deborah and Sunil, who testified that they'd come into conflict with Louise over her desire to stay out late with friends. Louise said her social life had never affected her ability to look after the children, and that she was a conscientious and caring nanny who loved her charges.
According to the statute, they have the right to address the court.
We dreamed of Maddie's future, and of Maddie and Brennan together, playing ball and roughhousing. Since that day, our lives are completely altered. Our hearts are heavy every day with the most excruciating pain. I get flashbacks of what I envision happened to my innocent, defenseless baby Maddie. I am sickened to think he was crying for help and was instead beaten by hands that were supposed to be caring for him.
I feel that the jury's decision is just and the state's mandated punishment is deserved. And despite my hatred for the actions of Louise and my current disdain for her, I really truly hope that she can face up to what she has done, gain forgiveness. And I truly hope that she may someday find the peace of God in her life again.
But Woodward steadfastly denied the charges.
I just like to maintain my innocence and say that I would never have hurt Manny, and I never did hurt Manny, and I don't know what happened to him. I'm not responsible for his death. I didn't kill Matthew Eapen.
The prosecution alleged that Woodward had violently shaken the baby and banged his head against a hard object, such as the bath. The defense argued that Matthew's death was the result of a previously undetected head injury. Woodward testified that Matthew had slept through the day, which was uncharacteristic for him, and had been unsettled and irritable when he woke up. She said she had put him down and left the room to dispose of a diaper, and when she returned, discovered him partially unconscious. She called 911 and the baby was rushed to hospital, where he died 5 days later. Rather than allowing the jury to consider the lesser charge of manslaughter, Woodward's defense insisted that the jury choose between a murder conviction and an acquittal, expecting that the circumstantial evidence would make it impossible to find Woodward guilty beyond reasonable doubt.
Stunned by this verdict. We think it's against the credible weight of the scientific evidence and of the testimony at the trial.
Do you see it as a gamble that failed?
Yes.
What right did you have to gamble with her future, Mr. Good?
Louise Woodward made this decision. No one else made the decision.
Prosecution was pleased with the result.
What are your feelings now for Louise Woodward?
Hope God forgives her for what she did to Matthew Eapen.
The defense filed post-conviction motions to the trial order, but Chief Prosecutor Gerard Leone was confident the result would stand.
These type of motions are very rarely granted, and We feel that this woman received a very fair trial. She received very competent, comprehensive representation.
I had no reason to lie at all. She absolutely told me that she dropped that child.
But on November the 10th, 1997, Judge Zobel reduced the conviction to involuntary manslaughter, and Woodward was released from prison based on time served. The judge said he believed Woodward had caused Matthew's death by her roughness, but that there was no malice involved, which made a murder charge inappropriate. Woodward returned to England and continues to maintain her innocence. Hollywood fashion designer Nan John Alexander is more renowned for his celebrity party pearls than cutting-edge design. But the high flyer was brought to earth with a thump in 2007 when he was arrested on rape charges. The Indian-born designer, who has dressed starlets such as Paris Hilton, Michelle Rodriguez and Mary J. Blige, has pleaded not guilty to more than 40 felony and misdemeanor counts of sexual assault. The charges include rape, sexual battery, and committing a lewd act on a child. At least 18 women and girls with ties to the fashion industry ranging in age from 14 to 27 have accused him of abuse. The charges cover a 3.5-year period from August 2003 to March 2007. The designer faces up to life in prison if convicted on all counts. Charges are also pending in New York and Texas. The Indian-born designer, known as Anand John, launched his fashion line in 1999 after graduating from the Parsons School of Design in New York. He was also a profile designer on America's Next Top Model in 2003. Alexander's attorney said his client was innocent of the charges.
It appears to me that this case fairly is gossip among young models that's gone a little wild. And there's been a great deal of cross-contamination, sharing of stories in print, on the internet, and personally. And we've now discovered that there's a common unifying source of this information that's essentially brought the girls together. Many of these cases are years old and are questionable.
Alexander's family has rallied around him, with his mother and sister leading protests in India and America calling for his release. In January 2008, they joined fashion designers and models outside the Gateway of India in Mumbai for a candlelight vigil to highlight their cause. Alexander's supporters believe he is the victim of a racist conspiracy.
Many of these girls, long after they claimed these events happened, did not report it to the police and continued to work with and associate, be seen with my client in his capacity as a designer. So there's much afoot to be studied.
The designer remains behind bars, unable to provide $1 million for bail. Prosecutors in New York have said that if he raises bail, they will ask for $2.5 million surety. He awaits his day in court. Coming up, Gloucester's House of Horrors. In 1994, in a quiet Gloucester street, police dug up the garden of the unremarkable house occupied by the West family, looking for evidence to substantiate the rumor that daughter Heather was buried under the patio. What they found was beyond anyone's worst nightmare.
We were trying to trace anyone who may know of anyone with that name and relatives. Unfortunately, we've not been able to trace any relatives whatsoever in this country, but inquiries are still continuing in that direction.
But before long, there was no need to search for relatives. Police found human bones, and Fred West confessed he had murdered his 16-year-old daughter. But the horrifying discovery grew worse when police realized there was more than one body buried at 25 Cromwell Street. As the grisly case unfolded, neighbors said they had no idea they were living next to a house of horrors.
He's always the kind of guy who would say, come on in, you know, I'll sit, have a cup of tea, no.
Was there anything unusual about the house?
Nothing unusual, just a lot of kids.
Forensic experts uncovered the remains of an unknown number of people, and West admitted killing and burying 9 women and girls, including his daughter. Police were faced with the daunting task of identifying the remains.
They will be arranging all these dozens of bones into the correct order, measuring them, photographing them, looking for any abnormalities, such as, you know, that could be compared with an X-ray of a possible person that was taken in life.
Fred West strenuously denied his wife Rosemary had been involved in any of the killings, but investigators found this difficult to believe. Fred helped authorities identify the dismembered bodies. Although some of the women had been abducted years earlier, it was a difficult task. Other victims were former lodgers in the West home. Finally, Fred was charged with the murder of his daughter, Heather West, teenage Alison Chambers, 18-year-old lodger Shirley Robinson, who was pregnant with Fred's child, 21-year-old Therese Saganthala, 15-year-old Shirley Hubbard, university student Lucy Partington, 18-year-old Juanita Mott, Linda Goff, and 15-year-old kidnap victim Carol Cooper. The bodies were uncovered under the cellar floor and in the rear garden. Fred also admitted murdering his first wife, Catherine Rena West, and his lover, their nanny, Anna McFall, who was carrying his baby.
Well, yesterday evening, Frederick West was charged with the murder of Catherine West, née Costello, between the 1st of January 1969 and the 27th of February 1994.
A former prostitute, Rena had been pregnant to another man when she married Fred in 1962, and her daughter, Charmaine, became Fred's stepdaughter. In 1964, she bore him a daughter, Anne-Marie. As police pieced the sordid story together, they became concerned for Charmaine's safety, as she had not been seen since the 1970s.
We're still seeking Charmaine. We've done that from the outset of the inquiry, and if anyone has any information relative to Charmaine, we'd like to hear from them.
After Fred killed a boy in a car accident, he moved with Rena, Anna, and the children to Gloucester, where he took a job in a slaughterhouse. Psychologists believe it was around this time that his sexual perversions took a violent turn, and he became obsessed with mutilation and corpses. Fred buried Rena and Anna in adjoining fields near his hometown of Mulch Markle. Charmaine's body was discovered under the steps of 25 Midland Road, Fred's former home. Fred's brother said the family was in shock over the revelations.
Coming out of a shock. He was my brother, and I still always remember him as he was.
Fred was charged with another 2 murders, taking the total to 12. Police were convinced that he'd committed more, but the bodies were never found, and Fred stopped cooperating. He was devastated when Rosemary refused to have any contact with him, despite his continued insistence that she was not involved in any of the murders. Before the charges could come to court, Fred West was found hanged in his cell on New Year's Day, 1995.
Well, we're looking into a death, and I think suffice to say at this stage that we have to keep all options open, although that may well be the case at the end of the day. Of course, we go into all inquiries of this nature with an open mind.
Well, it's the best way out from reading it. There's nothing else you can say. I think he deserves everything he got.
It'll save a lot of trouble, won't it?
The verdict was suicide, and few were sorry. But there was consternation over the decision to cremate him in Gloucester. People with family buried in the local cemetery were horrified at the idea of having his ashes anywhere near their loved ones. With Fred out of the picture, the prosecution turned its focus to Rosemary West. The widow was charged with 10 killings, including the murder of her daughter Heather and 8-year-old Charmaine. Although she maintained her innocence, the court heard a horrifying account of Rosemary's sadistic sexual assaults, and she was convicted on all counts. Sentenced to life in prison, she became only the second woman in British legal history to be granted a whole life tariff, prohibiting her release for almost any reason. However, a recent law lord's ruling that overturned this condition could see her out of prison in 2019. She would be 66 years old. In post-war London, authorities needed all the help they could get. Private detective Trixie Etheldridge and Annette Kerner ran the Mayfair Detective Agency, specializing in cases such as blackmail. Reporter John Parsons is asked to engage Kerner in conversation to disguise the fact that she's watching a house.
Oh, excuse me. I'm a private detective. Do you mind talking to me? I'm just watching a house over there.
No, certainly not. How long have you been doing this sort of work?
Oh, quite a long time.
Are you on your own?
No, I have a colleague. She's just come out of the police. Here she comes to relieve me. I've been on all night. This is my partner, Trixie.
Hello, Trixie.
Hello.
Do you enjoy this sort of work?
Rather, yes. It's most exciting.
Do you think I could go now?
Oh, yes, and thanks so much.
Very pleased indeed. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Night Guards was another private firm tackling crime.
Gordon, what is the object of Night Guards Limited?
The object of Night Guards Limited is to provide a service for the protection of private property, both private houses and commercial houses. For the protection of private property, it's important to remember that one must be very careful in choosing one's staff. The men that we choose are, in every case, ex-servicemen.
And so, if you want your own...
Uniformed night guards patrolled their clients' premises, keeping a weather eye open for suspicious activities. No cat burglars were going to get past these eagle-eyed men. Coming up, the $30 million art heist. On July the 2nd, 2000, a group of men wearing soldiers' uniforms and driving vehicles with military number plates approached a weapons depot in the Malaysian jungle. They told the guards that they were conducting an emergency spot check and took possession of large amounts of weapons and ammunition, including 5 grenade launchers. The guards even helped them load the Pajero. It wasn't until later that the army realized it had been duped. The inspection had actually been a raid carried out by a mysterious martial arts cult known as Al Maruna that professed to have supernatural powers. An ex-serviceman named Muhammad Amin Razali led the men. Razali had previously been court-martialed and jailed and was looking to take revenge on his former commander. The cult members hid in the jungle, where they were heard training with the weapons. An attempt to flush them out ended in disaster when 2 police officers and an army trooper were taken hostage, together with a civilian who had wandered into the camp by mistake. Authorities cordoned off the area but were held at bay for 5 days, during which one of the police officers and the trooper were killed. Finally, Razali surrendered and was taken into custody. The former soldier took an early interest in mysticism, occultism, paranormal and metaphysical science, and studied in Indonesia under Ibnu Abbas, Al Maruna's principal. The Indonesian-based cult has grown to more than 1,000 members in Malaysia, Brunei, Singapore, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. Al Maruna's followers claim they can make enemies hurl backward without touching them, are invincible against weapons, fire, or sharp objects, and can tie enemies without using rope. However, their capture put paid to the argument of invincibility, and Malaysian authorities were keen to show off their success. Both the army and the government had been greatly embarrassed by the ease with which the cult members had carried out the heist. Defense Minister Najib Razak fronted a press conference soon after the end of the standoff. I would like to announce that all members of the group have surrendered. There are 27 of them. 5 of them have injuries and 2 seriously injured. The other 22 are in police custody. Unfortunately, on our side, 2 of our personnel died. One was a policeman who was kept a hostage. It was Corporal Seeger, who was shot in cold blood. The other was a soldier from the 9th Rangers Regiment whom they captured 2 days ago and was tortured inhumanely with both his legs shot before he was shot dead. As far as the weapons and bullets they stole, I've been made to understand that all weapons have been recovered.
Obviously, the acts were criminal in nature. I mean, no religion will ask you to kill people, innocent people. No religion says you should steal weapons. No religion says you should kidnap people.
Razali and his lieutenants were brought to trial in Malaysia, where they received death sentences. 16 other cult members were sentenced to life imprisonment. Razali was hanged in 2006. And police have since clamped down on the sale of police and military uniforms. Morag and George Taylor's marriage has endured more than most, with mother of four Morag facing Edinburgh's High Court in 1998 charged with hiring a hitman to kill her husband. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to murder and would have gone to jail were it not for her husband's dramatic appeal to the judge, asking him to spare his wife from prison. He said he and the children couldn't live without her.
Just take every day as it comes. Sorry, I can't really talk to you.
And do you regret what you did in the past?
Yes. Sorry.
Morag and former lover Martin Randall paid a contract killer £1,000 to kill George, but the would-be killer vanished with the cash. The judge described it as an extraordinary case, but said there was never a serious threat to life. He sentenced Morag Taylor to 200 hours community service and fined Martin Randall £2,000. George and Morag later reconciled and sold their story to a tabloid newspaper. When armed robbers broke into Rome's National Gallery of Modern Art in 1998 and stole 3 priceless paintings, shaken culture minister Walter Veltroni said it was more like a kidnapping than a theft. The paintings by Van Gogh and Cézanne were recovered a month after the robbery.
Si è trattato di un'indagine molto complessa, molto difficile, molto rischiosa.
It was a very complex, very difficult, risky operation, but it was very well conducted.
Tra le forze dell'ordine e al livello di competenza.
Thanks to the collaboration of the police forces and the quality of their work during these 48 days. The artworks were snatched by 3 armed men who hid in the gallery until it closed and overpowered the guards, took the paintings and vanished without a trace. It didn't take police long to track down the stolen paintings, but they moved slowly to reduce the chance of damaging the irreplaceable works.
Si è riusciti così a pervenire al recupero delle 2 opere che erano conservate sotto un letto.
In Rome, we were able to recover a painting by Van Gogh and another by Cézanne. They were kept under a bed in contempt. My colleagues recovered the other Van Gogh in Turin. While the heist had seemed professional, the thieves were anything but. They targeted the 3 most expensive pieces of art, together valued at more than $30 million. But the paintings were unique and they were easy to trace. Instead of sitting on their bounty until the fuss had died down, the thieves hawked them around to prospective buyers. The fact that the thieves were so knowledgeable about the museum's security was also highly suspicious. The intruders had not only known their way to the guard post in the basement, they were aware that the camera surveillance system was out of order. Investigators soon tracked the paintings to an associate of one of the guards at the museum, and before long, the artworks were back where they belonged, in new frames.
Tomorrow they are in the museum. Tomorrow the museum is open because today is closed. Tomorrow is open and tomorrow the Van Gogh and the Cézanne are there.
8 people were arrested over the robbery, including guard Stefania Villongo, her husband and his friend Ennio Menes, who had served time in prison for robbery and murder. Romans were so delighted to have their national treasures back that they brought flowers to the museum to celebrate their return. The theft followed a dismal year for Italy's artworks, with vandals poking holes into Matisse paintings on loan to the Capitolina Museum from the National Gallery in Washington. And in 1992, thieves stole 13 artworks from a museum in Modena. All were eventually recovered.